Okay. Should we? Is the email chain ready?
Yeah, everyone should have it.
Okay, I'll just start. Start right now. We affirm contention 1 is conflict resolution. There are 2 scenarios and withdrawal is necessary. Scenario 1 is preventing U.S.-Iran conflict. Coronavirus opens up the risk of military confrontation more severe than ever before. Kay from 3 weeks ago confirms that the Trump administration is seeking to use COVID-19 crisis to capitalize on Iran's increased vulnerability. Iran and its militia partners may perceive COVID-19 as an opportunity to attack American forces with less risk of retaliation. The result is that both sides may escalate, producing a security dilemma that risks even greater military conflict. A U.S. pullout is necessary to stabilize. It prevents the next lethal attack. Loopholes from the beginning of this month reports that U.S. intelligence in the Middle East suggests that Iran is planning a potentially serious attack against U.S. military personnel in Iraq. The withdrawal of U.S. forces prevents Iran's attack from being the first domino in this escalatory spiral. Vandenberg 20 exclaims that if Iran ordered a lethal strike on U.S. forces, a strike on the Iranian bases that launched the missiles almost certainly would be the Pentagon's next move. Explosions and casualties pose a greater risk of renewed conflict with Iran. Such a response would be devastating, as Oscar 20 finds that the U.S. response fits right in the aims of Iran. They have more destruction to fuel their efforts to expel U.S. forces from the country, and the cycle of escalation would continue towards certain conflict. Second, there are 2 impacts. Impact 1 is a U.S.-Iran war. War 19 quantifies that this will lead to hundreds of thousands of dead. Impact 2 is humanitarian aid. Even if tensions don't escalate to war, preventing them is still critical, as Smith 20 finds vital humanitarian work in Iraq has been halted by the ongoing conflict between the United States and Iran. As a resulting heightened security difficulties continue, some 100,000 people will be affected. Scenario 2 is creating long-term multilateralism in the region. Hasbro 19 explains that when benefiting from the U.S. security umbrella anchored by its bases around the Gulf, Saudi Arabia has attempted to organize the region to aggressive military intervention. Despite this support, has gone little to establish a new regional order or contain Iranian influence. This sets up a greater likelihood of conflict and escalation. On the other hand, the lack of security guarantee pushes Saudi Arabia for the table for talks. Parsi 20 finds that when Trump declared his intention to pull troops out of the region, regional diplomacy among Iran and Saudi Arabia and de-escalation followed. The cards were reshuffled again in January when Trump ordered the assassination of Soleimani. The region is one more move towards conflict. Early signs of diplomatic progress achieved during the preceding months have vanished. No diplomacy risks escalation into war, as Harb 19 finds that peaceful coexistence only work if Tehran scales down its interference in the affairs of the Arab states and Riyadh accepts that Iran has a say in regional issues. Peaceful coexistence requires a will to talk and compromise. If either party shows reluctance, the region will continue to live with the possibility of war that can make all past wars look minor in comparison. Contention 2 is terrorism. Mylori 20 finds that currently the U.S.-led coalition against Islamic State has suspended operations against terrorist groups that focus on ensuring the security of military bases. As a result, limited their capacity to conduct training with partners to support their operations against ISIS. Critically, the remaining U.S. military presence that is defending the bases only worsens terrorism due to anti-American sentiment they foster. This has been proven to be empirically true, as Gopner 17 quantifies the number of terrorist attacks rose astonishing 1,900% in countries that the United States invaded or conducted airstrikes in, while other states saw a much more modest 42% increase. Gopner 17 identifies the root cause of anti-American sentiment, explaining that without an ongoing American presence, there would be far less incentive for al-Qaeda to attack. It is doubtful that ISIS would exist, and the Islamic State is using American presence in the Middle East as a justification for terrorism. This is why Thrall and Gopner 17 conclude that the right direction for the United States is to reduce the level of military intervention, and this approach would seek to reduce the incentive for anti-American terrorism. By ending the root cause, we can significantly decrease terrorism as a whole. As Greenwald 13 finds, it's often asked what we can do to stop terrorism. The answer is right in front of us. We could stop embracing the policies in that part of the world that fuel anti-American hatred. Al-Qaeda recruits and retains power through its ideology, which relies on people believing that America is at war with them. Thus, we affirm.
Can we see the evidence that says from Lubold, Iran is planning an attack now, according to U.S. intelligence?
Sure.
Okay. Honestly, just the card is fine. We don't need like the PDF or whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm just my computer's really low. It's slow.
All good, not a problem.
Okay. Here's a cut card. I read the green highlighted parts. Tell me when you get it so you can start.
All right, I got it. Grant, what about you? You're muted.
I haven't got it yet.
Okay.
Okay, I just got it. So we'll start taking prep. Like, Zane, do you have a timer?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so
Sorry. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, time. 14 seconds. Okay. I don't grant anything else.
now we're good.
Okay, cool. All right, anyone not ready? Oh, also, could you mute yourself? Thanks, cool, all good. All right. Grant and negate. Contention 1 is ending ISIS once and for all. Burns 19 of AP News writes that the Islamic State has ambitions to regenerate and remains a dangerous threat in Iraq and beyond. Importantly, a U.S. withdrawal from Iraq would also prevent action in Syria, as Felcher 20 of Politico explains that if the U.S. isn't in Iraq, they can't be in Syria, because Iraq is America's main point for which they launch missions within the country. U.S. presence is important for counterterrorism in 2 ways. First is by creating stability. Carafella 19 of the ISW explains that currently areas ISIS has lost to the Iraq and Syria are neither stable nor secure. Importantly, Brands 15 of the U.S. Army War College explains that terrorist groups prosper amid instability and security vacuums. However, U.S. presence helps, as COP 18 of the Military Times explains that the U.S. and coalition forces are involved in stabilization efforts, including resettlement of displaced Iraqi civilians and getting civilian infrastructure up and running again in cities that were previously devastated by ISIS. Brands continues that because withdrawal prevents these efforts, removal of American forces from a still unstable context could undercut any previous gains in counterterrorism efforts and facilitate the insecurity in which jihadist organizations thrive. Second is by training Iraqi forces. Nowak of the Washington Post writes in January that American training and funding is responsible for the country's only counterterrorism force that is not corrupt. However, if the United States were to withdraw its troops from Iraq, the government counterterrorism force would likely merge with Iranian-backed militias, which would undermine their reputation and constitute a large blow to the Iraqi state. Felcher corroborates that when the U.S. left Iraq in 2011, the Iraqi military quickly deteriorated to the point where the Islamic State could grow in our absence. For these reasons, Carafella concludes that when ISIS seeks to reestablish territorial control in Iraq, it will likely succeed if the U.S. withdraws. There are 2 impacts of an ISIS resurgence. First is civilian death. Jameson 16 of NBC warns that an ISIS resurgence could be deadlier than in the past, which killed 18,000 civilians in Iraq in just 2 years. Second is refugees. The last time ISIS surged, they displaced millions of Iraqis with the damage still being felt, as the New York Times finds that, for example, in Iraq, 1.8 million are still internally displaced. Contention 2 is stopping yet another Middle Eastern war. Currently, Israel and Iran are sworn enemies, with Smith 19 of NBC News noting that Israel views Tehran as an existential threat. Luckily, U.S. presence in the region has thus far kept Israel at bay, but affirming reverses for 2 warrants. First is nuclearization. Estiani 19, professor at George Washington University, writes that if Iran faces no reactions to its provocations, it will expand its nuclear program, since Tehran believes nukes are the best guarantee for national security and act as a proactive shield. This would be disastrous, as Farley 19 of the National Interest writes that if Iran appeared to be on the verge of nuclear weapons, Israel might well consider a preemptive nuclear attack, as Israeli planners would no longer deem a conventional strike sufficiently lethal to destroy or delay the Iranian nuclear program. Second is abandonment. Harold 19 of Haaretz writes that Israel is scared by America's apparent desire to quit the region, which would leave Iran with more room to maneuver. Horowitz 19 of the Times of Israel corroborates that the concern in Israel is that the US's hands-off approach will encourage Iranians to attack Israel. This is harmful, as Horshig 19 of The Conversation writes that Israel is known to take aggressive preemptive action to protect itself, including launching preemptive strikes on neighboring nations it perceives as threatening. If international relations with Iran grow more volatile, Israel could take dramatic unilateral action, which she concludes Iran would surely retaliate against and could trigger a region-wide conflict that would spiral throughout the Middle East. This would be disastrous and lead to war, as Ora 19 of The Atlantic finds that the conflagration can be lighted by just a single spark, and after days of large-scale exchanges, the real war would begin, with the number of rockets raining down on Israel totaling as high as 4,000 per day. Faced with thousands of casualties, Israel would surely try to end the war early by employing a nuke. This would be horrible, as Terse 13 of Mother Jones finds that it could kill 5.6 million people in Tehran alone. Save lives and negate. Ready for cross?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a timer? Oh yeah, I have one.
I have one. I could just.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Let's talk about your impact about nuclear war. You say that like Israel doesn't want to continue fighting, so it's just gonna nuke Iran.
Well, not that Israel doesn't want to continue fighting, but that Israel wouldn't want casualties on Israeli soil, obviously.
They're just gonna like put in like Iran.
Yeah,
So,
it's an asymmetric battle because Iran doesn't have nukes, obviously.
oh, okay.
So they could end the war very quickly.
And you're saying that Iran will get nukes in your world. So,
No, I'm saying that Israel would stop them on the path to getting nukes.
Okay, with bombing. Okay, sure.
Yeah, can I get a question?
Sure.
So on your first point about Iran, you're saying that in the status quo, Iran is planning to attack Iraqi troops American troops within Iraq, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what changes when you affirm?
Oh no! What changes is that like U.S. is not going to be there, so then there's nothing to attack.
And so Iran would stop all of its aggression in Iraq.
Yeah, we're saying that the root cause of this aggression is like the United States. So
Okay, that's fine.
If U.S. leaves, like that tension goes away.
Yeah. Separate question in that case. Is fiat durable for this resolution? So say like you vote pro and like U.S. troops leaves or whatever. A few years from now, could the U.S. come back if something crazy happens?
Probably not.
Probably. Well, why?
Because like the resolutions is to like taking away troops. We can't just have these U.S. troops come again, right?
So, but if we're talking about like the most educational forms of debate, we should probably look at like policy decisions and real world implementations and how these would occur. So if the United States were to pull troops from like Afghanistan, for example, but then all of a sudden there was like a huge war or something and we really cared about this country, wouldn't we go back and try and help them?
But the problem is like this resolution is not like realistic anyway. So like we shouldn't try to like make it more realistic. U.S.
But wait, hold on. But we engage with hypotheticals all the time to like have better education and like talk about.
This point of return is like as like unlikely as U.S. leaving in the first place.
I agree in the status quo. The U.S. is probably not going to return because we haven't left. I'm saying like hypothetically, if something crazy were to happen, maybe the U.S. comes back. That's all. That's the only concession I want.
No, I'm not going to give you that concession because a resolution specifically says U.S. is pulling out military troops. It never says that U.S. military troops can come back.
Yeah, I understand. But just because it doesn't say something can happen doesn't mean that thing can't happen.
I mean,
it's like a double negative doesn't necessarily mean the positive, right?
But like,
you can get a question. It's okay.
Okay. So unlike your like nuclearization, so Iran just like backed out of the nuclear treaty. Like Iran is like increasing its uranium in the status quo. Isn't Iran like building a bomb right now?
No, they're enriching low-grade uranium, and it's actually a very little amount. So it's like 3% of total capacity they need.
Okay, yeah, but that 3% is going to like 40%.
No, it went from like 2 to 3 in the past few months.
Okay, sure. Isn't I'm not a timing cross, so is it how long do we have? Oh, okay.
Can I talk some evidence? I'd like to see your card about how the areas are neither stable or secure and the U.S. helps stabilization efforts.
Do you want the one that says, like, when they leave it gets destabilized, or the one that says what they're doing right now to help stabilize?
Can I get both? And then also your knock.
Sorry, Grant, you wanted the one that said neither stable nor secure, right?
She wants
right.
both.
Yeah, both, please.
Okay, cool. Okay, I have both. I'm sending the email now.
Okay. I'll let you know when I see the email so you know when we start prep.
In the meantime, Grant and I are gonna run a little bit more.
Okay.
All right, starting now. All good. 33, so 47 total.
We're gonna run a little bit more prep. Starting now.
Mute your mic, by the way.
Okay, that was another 26 seconds. So we've used like 26 total. All right, is everybody good? Okay.
Mute your mic.
Oh. All right, here we go. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to run a little bit more prep. I'll start it now. Okay. That was 21 more seconds. Sorry, my computer's glitching. Okay. Starting prep, or starting my time now. First on the argument about terrorism, their strategy of combating terrorism is like playing whack-a-mole. A terrorist pops up and then the US strikes. It's ineffective because even if they beat down ISIS, another group will just arise. They're treating these symptoms and not the disease. First, you can look to our Myroy card from case that says that we've shifted in the region away from doing counterterrorism and restabilization operations and instead towards provocative actions to defend our bases from local militias, which means that the anti-American sentiment from US military presence still occurs, but their offense on how it's effective in countering terror and rebuilding stability does not happen anymore. Next, on their stability argument specifically, U.S. military bases across the Persian Gulf actually encourage regional leaders to act more aggressively because they know the U.S. is invested in the stability of their regime. Carlin 19 explains that it creates a moral hazard because it encourages the leaders to act in ways they might otherwise not, knowing that the U.S. has invested. Next, on training. First off, Iraqi troops are self-sufficient, so U.S. military presence is not needed anymore. Kube in March 2020 explains that Iraqi counterterrorism service has made significant progress and can handle many counter-ISIS operations. Second, there are EU allies in the region that are training regional troops. That makes it non-corrupt, which is distinctly why the U.S. Which is distinctly why counterterror can still occur without the U.S. But letting just Iraqi services do counterterror is comparatively better because of the anti-American sentiment that we cause from doing counterterror in the region. You would rather prefer the U.S. to not be there. On their Israel argument specifically, our case solves for theirs from our C1 because diffusing tensions with Iran and aggression with Iran from our C1 solves back for the Israeli fear that Iran will expand and Iran will proliferate. But moreover, U.S. reliability for Israel has already deteriorated, which means their link isn't unique. Usher 19 explains that the blow that Iranians dealt to Saudi oil production facilities was not met in any way with a response from the Trump administration, revealing the utter collapse of the security doctrine, compounded by Trump's decision to pull U.S. troops out of northeastern Syria. Trump has become unreliable for Israel. This means that which means that their link should have already triggered. But on their pro-life warrant specifically, first you can turn it because U.S. presence is what makes Iran more likely to go nuclear. Shapiro 16 explains that Iran's main incentive to acquire nuclear weapons is to deter U.S. conventional attacks. To the extent that a lower U.S. military presence in the region diminishes those fears, Iran would be less likely to bid for nuclear weapons. Empirics prove that this is true, because Iran is already developing nuclear weapons in the status quo. CNN finds that on March 3rd, the UN released a letter alleging that Iran has developed nuclear-capable ballistic missiles, and Tehran's stockpiles of low-enriched uranium now far exceed 300 kilograms, which is the limit set by the 2015 nuclear deal. They're on the path towards proliferation just because of the U.S. But on the abandonment warrant specifically, first off, they have no link because even without the U.S. in the Gulf, Israel has countless other mechanisms to secure themselves. And as Majid 19 confirms, against the backdrop of a U.S. military withdrawal, Netanyahu, the very PM of Israel, declared that Israel would defend itself against its own regional threats. For example, to prevent Iranian mobility, Israel has been independently striking Iranian proxies in the region. This shows that they're self-sufficient. But second, this exists through several more ways. A is the existing security development. Indictment 20 explains that decades of American economic and military largesse and close security cooperation have made it possible for Israel to defend itself by itself. B is stronger regional allies. Quero 19 confirms that empirically, growing concern regarding the U.S.'s efforts to engage with Iran have driven Israeli-Saudi cooperation. This cooperation between Israel and a number of Arab Sunni states has reached unprecedented extents in the weight of Trump's uncertainty. C is the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Franceman 2020 explains that U.S.-Israel defense partnership has thrived in the recent years, and the U.S. has invested heftily in supporting Israel's missile defense system. But lastly, even if you do not believe any of that is true, there's no way that Israel launches a preemptive strike, because ZEC 15 explains that Israeli players' veto and the way their internal structure makes it impossible, because it seems unlikely that they would have enough elite support for him to seriously consider such a daring operation. Israel has strong institutional checks, and any military move undergoes the support and lacks the support of any of Israel's highly respected national security establishments.
We're gonna take a little bit of prep. Zane, tell me when you're ready.
Are you guys ready?
Oh, yeah, we're starting prep now.
Okay.
Okay, we're done.
What time?
Okay, so it's gonna be Zane. Can you mute your? Yeah. So it'll be my case, and then all of their case. All right. Is everyone good? All right, cool. On our C1, all of their responses are cross-apps except for the ones on training. The first thing to say is Iraq is self-sufficient. That's not true. The Iraq evidence is very clear that if the United States leaves, they'll just the counterterrorism forces will become part of Iranian militias. But do you buy this evidence? Because when you look back to precedent, in 2011 when we pull out, the Iraqi military essentially collapsed. On the second response they give is the EU will train them anyway. The International Crisis Group finds that once the United States leaves, so does the entire anti-ISIS coalition. That's really important because that means the EU won't be able to train Iraqi soldiers anyway. But two, we'd say the US is way more responsible than the EU right now. There's no way they can fill in. On our second intention, the first thing to say, like they fall back, but that's not true because their first intention about Iran only actually avoids conflict. It doesn't stop Iranian expansion. On the second thing they say, which is that like Israel feels secure, it doesn't feel secure right now because of the Aramco attacks. That's not true because Soleimani reaffirmed. On our first point about nuclearization, they turn it because they say U.S. presence causes Iranian nuclearization. We'll concede this, but the SWO proved that our warranting isn't true, so there's no offense there. On our second word about abandonment, the first thing they say is that they would defend themselves. We entirely agree Israel defend themselves, but importantly, we would say that the way they do this is by going towards more extreme actions. Then they essentially tell you that like they have their allies Saudi Arabia, so that they solve. One, we say they'll never act. They don't like fully trust Saudi Arabia, so they doesn't actually solve. But two, we say Saudi Arabia is only strong when the United States is there, so they can't act. This alliance can't actually deter Iran. Then on the bottom, they say like Zek says that like they'll just veto it, but this doesn't make sense because we tell you that Iran is an existential threat to Israel, so they'll launch the nuke anyway. Go to their case. First, start in Iran. There's a couple of problems. First, Iran will always try to expand into Iraq. Denver 20 VOA claims that Iran's use control over Iraq is crucial to their survival as Iraq serves as an economic lung that can help alleviate the impact of sanctions and a crucial logistical supply link that allows them to work with the Assad regime and Hezbollah. For this reason, Iran will never give up on fighting on Iraq. But this means you actually turn it because voting pro ensures Iran gets control of Iraq. Middle 19 the Military Times explains that the U.S. must maintain military presence in Iraq in order to counter Iranian influence. Importantly, for this reason, Jihad 24 on the Iraq explains that U.S. control would allow Iran to gain increasingly vast amounts of influence in Iraq. Jihad continues that increasing Iranian influence lead American hawks to treat Iraq as an enemy and push Trump to sanction Iraq. It's devastating as Corredo, one of the nation finds the sanctions on Iraq in the 90s resulted in nearly 227,000 children deaths. But fundamentally, Iran literally has no motivation to do this. Historically, when they responded to the Soleimani attack, they avoided all casualties. But two, never even give you a motivation for why Iran is going to attack the United States and Iraq. It doesn't make sense. But two, if the motivation that exists and is about like starting conflict, it exists anyway because it's nearly all truth, not all of them. On their second war, where they talk about like multiple battles on first, we say that because you need two parties for peace. So all of the responses like from Denver that says like Iran wants to go into Iraq anyway, also apply here is not going to happen. But two, Saudi Arabia doesn't want it. It won't actually do anything anyway because Saudi confidence in the United States is independent from actual military presence. For example, Hubbard 19 New York Times says that after Iranian attacks on Saudi Arabian oil fields, the United States sent more troops to defend Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia decided to tone things down in Yemen. But secondly, Saudi Arabia wants high tensions anyway. Al-Rashid 18 in the New York Times explains that MBS is serving the enmity of Iran as a fundamental prerequisite to ensuring the environment necessary for wider ideological change in Saudi Arabia from Wahhabism to Saudi nationalism. As far as rising tensions with Iran are inherently in the interest of MBS, who will never actually engage in true de-escalation that threatens his goals regardless of what the United States is actually doing. Will have no link here. But then go to this where they talk about terrorism. First, on the top, Bigelow 20 PolitiFact finds the main thing that actually causes people to join ISIS is things like a lack of economic opportunity and poor governance. The reason that's really important is you say that fundamentally, insofar as neither side actually falls back to them, the only thing that's important is mitigating those effects to begin with, and counterterrorism is the only thing that does that as opposed to U.S. pulling out. But then secondly, that we still have there'll still be anti-American sentiment because we have like tons of other bases around in the Middle East and in places like Afghanistan. This means that ISIS can still just use like those bases as like a poster child for recruitment. Secondly, we would say fundamentally pull out validates terrorism, which is really bad because if you pull out, then it validates all the terrorist actions and shows that it works. Lastly, their evidence from Gaffney that says like an increase in terrorism where there's United States presence is fine because what we say is reverse causal insofar as we'd only send troops to a region that has terrorists to begin with. We don't send troops to a region where there are no.
We'll use a bit of prep.
That was like, I think 11 seconds of practice. Yeah. Okay. Are you ready for cross?
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about your response about how Trump would sanction Iraq, right? So the Iraqi parliament recently just voted on kicking the US out of the region, and if pressure continues, the US may be forced to leave. So what was Trump's reaction to that vote?
I mean, yeah, so we think you should read offense probably before summary. So like it's not in the running.
Wait, no,
Is that
no.
fair?
My question is, what was Trump's reaction to that vote?
I mean, yeah. So Trump said that like he would sanction Iraq if they kicked him out. But
Yeah.
insofar as no one reads anything about like the United States leaving Iraq anyway, it
Okay.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, so then my question is, why is it more likely for Trump to sanction Iraq if he leaves by himself?
What do you, well, no, so the warranting I give for why he's going to sanction Iraq is that once Iran gains more influence in Iraq, American hawks treat Iraq as an enemy, and they push Trump towards sanctions.
Right, and that influence is in the form of, for example, supporting PMF militias in the area, right? Like
Sure, or just like like
so,
yeah,
right.
sure.
So at the point where the U.S. is already targeting sanctions towards Iranian proxies, such as the PMF militias, why is your argument unique?
Well, no, because my argument is about sanctions on Iraq.
Yeah, and he's already sanctioning the Iranian proxies that you just conceded they operate through in Iraq.
Well, no, but like my argument is that he's going to sanction like the state of Iraq, not like individual proxies.
If Iran is only operating through those individual proxies.
Because my entire argument is that once Iran gains like increasingly more influence in Iraq
through those PMF militias, which you already conceded.
Sure, but like the thing you have to understand about the militias, they also like have political power within the government.
Exactly, and he's sanctioning those political groups already, so it's not unique. But it's okay. You want a question?
We're talking about like different sanctions. Yeah, sure. Okay. So you basically tell me on your like first contention that like Iran wants to attack U.S. forces in Iraq. Why? Why?
What do you mean, on our C1?
Yeah.
Right. So the warranting that we give you, which is uninteracted with, is because now that COVID-19 is increasingly a problem, Iran thinks that they can combat US troops in the status quo because they believe that Trump will back down due to domestic issues at hand. So it's sort of a miscalculation scenario where Iran miscalculates Trump's ability to react to this, but instead Trump thinks that this is a situation where he can capitalize on it, and it causes a back and forth escalation which goes to war. Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, okay. So you say that the U.S. is doing rebuilding missions, and we need to have counterterror to mitigate for the inevitable problem of terrorism, right?
Sure.
Okay, so the U.S. just suspended counterterrorism missions this January, and insofar as that's true, can you name me another counterterrorism mission that we're doing?
What do you mean? I feel like there's multiple counterterror missions, not like one.
We suspended our counterterror coalition in Iraq.
We'll see that.
But can you name me one outside of Iraq that they're doing?
It's time, but like the coalition is fine. It's different from the U.S. What the U.S. is actually doing.
The U.S.-based coalition, but that's fine. Do you want to see the card?
That the coalition suspended stuff? No.
Okay. We will take some time to prep. I'll start prep once I get connected with my partner. Okay, we'll start prep now.
Wait, we're not actually connected yet, so I don't think our prep time should start. We haven't done it. I'll just let you know when. Oh, no, wait, now we're connected. Okay, we'll start prep right now.
Okay, so they read a trend about how Trump would sanction because.
That was, that was 2 minutes and 28 seconds. So I think that was it. Okay. Okay. Let me just start time. Okay. Is everyone ready? Thumbs up. Okay. So I'm gonna go to our C1 about conflict resolution. Then I'm gonna go to their case. Okay. Okay. On our C1 about conflict resolution, our key evidence from like 3 weeks ago tells you that Trump right now is capitalizing on a weak Iran, and Iran is doing the same thing. This is really bad because they're both escalating into war. That's why Lubel from like 14 days ago tells you that Iran is planning a very, very serious attack very, very soon on US, on Iraq. And this is really bad. And Brook 20 tells you if you withdraw, Iran has no incentive to do this. This cycle of escalation decreases, and we're not going to have a full-out war. And if we do have a full-out war, hundreds of thousands of people will die. They give you a few responses. First, they say that Iran is a very expansionist. But the reason why Iran wants us to expand is because U.S. is attacking their forces in Iraq. They're not. If U.S. pulls out, they have no incentive to expand because like Iraq is their ally. They do not want to like capture Iraq. There's no reason why they're going to continue doing it. Then the second thing they say is like historically nothing has happened. The war hasn't happened. But the uniqueness that they're missing is the coronavirus. The coronavirus is making it a lot scarier because both sides are escalating a lot more significantly because they think each other are weak. Then they say that like we still have some troops, but like nearly all means like 98%. We can't like continue. We can't have a war with just 2% of our troops there. This outweighs all of their case for on a prerequisite because we say that like if we take away Iran's root cause of being aggressive in the first place, then that means like Israel and Saudi Arabia are not going to be like aggressive anyway because like because Iran isn't aggressive without the United States. Now let's go to their side. First, they completely on terrorism. They completely dropped the myroid uniqueness that basically tells you that right now U.S. is shifting from like doing anti-terror operations to just like protecting its bases and protecting them from like proxy militias. This is really important because that means that they have no offense on ISIS because U.S. isn't doing any anti-ISIS stuff in the first place. And the second reason is that they also on stability they kind of drop our Carlin evidence that tells you that like right now U.S. isn't actually doing any restabilization efforts. It's just bombing people and militias, and that's just further exacerbating anti-American sentiment. Then on trading, our evidence is from March 2020 that says that counterterrorism is now is sufficient. Iraqi counterterrorist efforts can already fight ISIS in the status quo. They say that like historically hasn't worked, but now the troops are finally ready, so it will work in the future. Then on to like Iran and Israel. First, there's a few problems with that. Iran is only nuclearizing because of U.S. presence. So if you get rid of U.S. presence, that completely goes away. They can see that. Then the second thing we would say is that like Iran is already being sanctioned, so they're like U.S. isn't going to sanction them more. And then also they kind of drop our nuclear umbrella argument that basically tells you that Iran has like a lot of missile defense systems, so they have no incentive to like actually because they have a nuclear umbrella, the like Iran aggression isn't going to actually do anything because they have missile defense systems. And also the majority of institutions in Israel do not think Iran is an existential threat, so they're not going to actually do anything.
We're going to take prep.
Hold on. Right before that, I think I missed something. Did you say Iran has a nuclear umbrella?
No, we said sorry. I mean Israel has a like nuclear.
Okay.
Actually,
Okay,
real
then,
quick,
maybe.
can we also call the thing that says the United States is like shifting to like provoking them? It's like
Yeah,
I
Miles.
or
I
something.
don't think we need that.
Okay, it's fine. I guess we don't need it.
Instead, could we see the piece of evidence that says the majority of Israeli politicians don't view Iran as an existential threat?
Yeah, sure.
Skylar, are you sending that or should I?
I can send it.
Okay.
Are you guys are waiting for it, so you're not running prep?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not running prep.
I'll let you know once I send it. I sent it.
Do you have the card yet?
I just got it. Yeah, Grant.
I haven't gotten it yet, but we can start prep now. That's fine.
Hold on. Okay, starting. Okay, pausing. The existential threat part, do you claim that's the IDF part?
It's just the card.
Yeah, but like which part of it?
The entire card.
It doesn't say the word existential threat, so I'm assuming you're paraphrasing the IDF part to say that.
No, we read the card, but that's just how. It's fine. That's the card.
Anyway.
Okay, that's cool.
Like it
We're gonna
indicates
resume
it doesn't use like the exact rhetoric that we used.
Okay, that's fine. One sec. Sorry. Okay, resuming. Time. So I have us at 2 left. Whatever, doesn't matter. Their case first. Or I guess, sorry, counterterrorism first, then their case, then my case. Okay, everyone ready? Oh, one more time. Could you mute yourself? Because
Okay, sorry.
all good, not a problem. Awesome. On counterterrorism, we can see the Kabul evidence which said that Iraq is sufficient enough to deter the whatever. Go to their case. At the top, They mishandled the Dana evidence, but it finds that Iran always has an intention to attack Iraq because it wants to evade U.S. sanctions. Sanctions on Iraq or on Iran are going to be non-unique. That's really important because it means that regardless of who you vote for, Iran will always try to be aggressive in Iraq because that's the only way that it can continue to do things like fund its proxy militias, like Hezbollah, for example, by like using Iraq to do so. That's really important because it means that Iran's aggression has nothing to do with the United States' presence in the region, but everything to do with U.S. sanctions, which is non-unique. Insofar as that's true, their entire Iran argument falls because Iran's going to be equally as aggressive regardless. From there, extend that turn that Granka is from the military times, but it finds that U.S. presence in the status quo is deterring Iran from fully invading. However, when you pull the trigger on the affirmative, this means that Iran's going to invade Iraq because it like really wants to for like economic reasons and political reasons as a regional hegemon. The jihad evidence, though, is really damning, but it finds that American hawks, if Iran were to invade, would view Iraq as the enemy and therefore would have to sanction them similar to we do Iran. That's really bad, though, because historically sanctions have killed 220,000 people. This outweighs in a couple of reasons. First is the strength of Lincoln probability. It's because this sanctions argument is 100% conceded. No new ink is allowed in first final focus. The argument's done from there. But then secondly is a prerequisite, because we would say that if the United States is going to sanction Iraq, this is going to lead to a very destabilized government, which can allow for more proxy wars to happen, which is their terminal impact about like wars in general. The reason this makes sense is because historically, every single proxy war within the Middle East is always fought in the poorest of the poor countries. For example, Yemen, which is the lowest GDP per capita. The reason this is true is because it's like destabilized countries are much easier to like fight for hedging. That outweighs their case on a prereq and strength of length, very clear affirmative or con ballot. Go to our second contention about Israel. They extend three responses. The first is the Shapiro evidence, which finds that the U.S. is the reason for nuclearization. We conceded nuclearization doesn't link to Israel war, therefore it doesn't matter. On the second word about abandonment, our Harel evidence is conceded. What it finds is that Israel is incredibly scared about the United States' desire to quit the region, which leaves Iran with more room for maneuver. The Horowitz evidence is also conceded. What it finds is that the concern in Israel is that Americans' hands-off approach is going to encourage Iran to attack Israel because they're not deterred in the status quo. The only response they give is twofold. One, they say that the United States umbrella means that Israel will always feel safe, but our link is perceptual. For example, Saudi oil stuff didn't trigger it because that was about Saudi Arabia specifically, but with Israel, they felt like their alliance was secure. However, when you affirm the resolution and you have Israel or Israel no longer feeling secure because the United States is pulling out literally all of its troops from the Gulf, then this like triggers the link about Israel feeling incredibly like insecure, and therefore they launch a preemptive strike. That's the evidence from Horshid, which is also conceded that Israel is historically known to take fast and aggressive actions against their neighbor, and Iran would surely retaliate. They talk about an existential threat. Netanyahu believes it's an existential threat. That's in Military Times 2017. From there, a war between Israel and Iran is probably pretty bad and would kill hundreds of thousands of people. Thus negate. Okay, ready for cross.
Yeah. Everybody else good? All right. First, on your Israel contention, you say that the link is perceptual. So, and then you give an example of how Saudi Arabia pullout didn't trigger it because it was Saudi Arabia, not Israel, right?
Mm-hmm. But so, in case you guys talk about, like, you read Parsi saying that Saudi Arabia thought that they were.
Yeah, sure. Okay, but here's my question to you then. Given that we've also done a lot of actions that indicate that the security umbrella from the U.S. is gone, such as pull out of Syria and not retaliate to the oil attacks like you talked about, what is the threshold for triggering your link? Like, why does a U.S. pullout uniquely trigger it if you guys conceded earlier that U.S. reliability is already down?
So just because it's one country doesn't mean that Israel's perception is that they're giving up on the entire region as a whole. The evidence is very clear in saying that those actions in Syria like made Israel scared that this could be a reality. We're saying the bright line is when the United States kicks out of the Gulf entirely.
Right. If they're already scared, why don't we see signs of them, for example, getting ready to launch preemptive
There's
strike?
a difference between having a fear that something could happen and being absolutely certain that the United States no longer gives a shit.
Okay, and then, does Israel have the political structure to launch a first strike?
Yeah, you guys say there's checks and balances with like Netanyahu vetoing. I give you evidence saying that Netanyahu views Iran as an existential threat.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not Netanyahu who vetoes. It's not Netanyahu who vetoes. It's other members of his cabinet who veto it.
Also, even if we don't win, that it's necessarily a nuclear strike, any preemptive strike still probably triggers.
No, but this is not specific to a nuclear strike. This evidence that we read that that Samra extends, Zek just says that Israel will never feel inclined to launch a preemptive strike or any type of militant aggression.
So that's not actually true, because your evidence says that, which you don't highlight, says at this point. Our evidence says it is quite clear that the military leadership does not support military action at this point. So, like, sure, in the status quo, we agree.
Yeah, and it
no,
gives
like, crazy war stuff.
It gives warrants for, because it's unlikely to find it as...
No, we agree. But those warrants don't matter, because we're talking about the change in the affirmative. We say, though, the conceded Smith evidence, that we view Iran as an existential threat.
No question.
I wasn't timing. Do we have time left?
Yeah, we have 45 seconds.
Okay, cool. You're dropping terror, right?
I don't know. We'll see.
All right. In that case, let's talk about the terror argument. You guys give me evidence that says that there's a 19,000% increase in terror in the regions that the U.S. occupies, right?
Yeah, sure.
Isn't this reverse causal, because the U.S. only enters regions that do have terror in the first place?
Because the card later says that the root cause of this is actually anti-American sentiment.
Okay, but you guys in your summary speech dropped the Giglio evidence, which says that the main root cause of terrorism is things like a lack of economic opportunity.
Okay. But we would say our myroid evidence tells you that like what U.S. is doing right now is just like bombing like Iraq. That's probably bad for the economy. All right.
Wait, I agree.
Okay. Is how long do we have? I'm not telling you.
I think that's
probably time.
Oh, I just gotta. We have
Okay.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. All right. Everybody good? Okay. Right now, we know that the U.S. is about to, that Iran is about to launch a strike on the U.S. that is lethal enough for the U.S. to engage in retaliation. The warranting that Kay gives is that because COVID-19 increases the risk of miscalculation, because Iran thinks that the U.S. is going to focus on domestic problems rather than the retaliation, this situation uniquely changes both sides' decision-making calculus, which makes conflict the most likely it's ever been in the status quo. All their responses are about how historically it's never happened. Again, because the decision-making calculus changes due to COVID-19, like we just explained, none of their responses actually apply. Next, they also give a response about how sanctions means that Iran is aggressive no matter what, and how that makes our entire Iran argument fall. The problem is that the U.S. is not functionally able to engage in a war with Iran if they are not in the region. At the point where Ward quantifies that a U.S.-Iran war would lead to hundreds of thousands of dead, you know that right now, if you continue on the status quo, exchanges of strikes that escalates to war happen. But if the U.S. pulls out, it doesn't matter if Iran's still aggressive, because the U.S. functionally is unable to engage in a war with Iran. It doesn't matter if Iran's aggressive insofar as 100,000 people don't die because the U.S. doesn't engage. Next, they also give you this turn about sanctions. They literally conceded that this turn wasn't really good in Second Cross. I don't know why they're still going for it. They said in Second Cross that it's through proxy militias and political parties in Iraq. And given that the U.S. is already sanctioning these political parties in Iraq, there's no reason at all, there's no warranting for why they would sanction the entirety of Iraq. But then on Israel, they have literally no offense, because the existing first they drop that the U.S. umbrella is the U.S. umbrella means that Israel has no existential threat to them, and the existing development in the area means that there's no existential threat to Israel. Second off, they also drop that even if there is an existential threat, there's no functional structural possibility for Israel to do a first strike, because Israel political parties would veto it, as they believe that they do not view the Iranian threat as much as Netanyahu, which is the warrant that they cite, views it. Insofar as the majority of the cabinet would veto this, there's no possibility of an Israel-Iran strike. You're going to be affirming right away to withdraw U.S. troops, de-escalate tensions, and stop the U.S.-Iran war. That outweighs on magnitude, and that solves their case.
Okay, we'll take like our 5 seconds for whatever we have. All right, Zane, you good?
I think you're
I wasn't
we're starting.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're starting prep now for our 5 seconds.
you have two.
We're good.
Yep.
So it will just be their case and then my case. Is anyone not good? All right, great. Start on their case on Iran. The easiest way to not go for this argument is the fact that Iran has historically avoided hitting U.S. casualties. The reason that's the example is like after Soleimani, they purposely avoided attacking like U.S. bases that would actually kill people. The reason that's important is insofar as historically they've avoided U.S. casualties as a whole, there's no reason why their motivation to actually attack the United States and like actually kill people all of a sudden changes. We would say that like they don't even explain why this is true and why Iran wants to start a war. But the easiest place to vote is actually on our turn. The Denver evidence says that once the United States pulls out, Iran wants to be aggressive and control Iraq. The reason that's important is that the jihad evidence finds that as soon as the U.S. pulls out, Iran is able to completely control Iraq. So that's really, really bad because jihad brothers that this would mean that the United States starts to view Iraq as an enemy, which will cause U.S. hawks to push Trump to impose sanctions on Iraq. This is really bad because our evidence concludes this would kill 227,000 people. They make a new response saying that like we already sanctioned militias, but our evidence is about economic sanctions isn't even in summary. There's no reason to evaluate. At that point, the weighing is conceded one. We say you vote on strength of link as far as it's conceded the entire round until first final focus. It's really, really easy to pull the trigger. Second, we think the prereq is really easy. We say sanctions because they kill so many people, does such a devastating effect to stabilize the entirety of Iraq, which just makes it feeding ground for a proxy war, which kills thousands of people and also reduces their impact. Go to our second contention on Israel. The only thing they extend in final focus is that like Israel just veto it. But again, remember what Zane tells you, which that Netanyahu literally views Iran as an existential threat. At that point, you extend the conceded Harel evidence, which finds that Israel is scared that the United States' desire to quit Iraq, and as soon as they do, it leaves Iran more room to maneuver. For this reason, Horowitz finds that Israel will get really, really concerned, which Horowitz finds that because Israel is known for preemptive strikes, a preemptive strike is likely. That's really bad because Turris finds that a preemptive nuclear strike can kill 5.6 million people, but even if it's a normal strike, it triggers into war. This outweighs first on magnitude, as far as mutually that one, a nuclear strike is really, really bad, but two, any fight between Israel and Iran will draw in other actors because even greater war, which destabilizes the region as a whole even more. It's pretty clean. You can vote on the turn or Israel. It's not that bad.
Good round.
Yeah.
Hey, can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. I thought this was a good round. First on, let's do terrorism. I thought it was probably a wash in the end. I'm actually not even sure if either of you extended anything off of it. But I thought both teams did a good job with not going for it. Then on Israel, I thought actually it probably was a wash in the end. I probably could sift through some of the defense that the pro reads on the argument about whether or not Israel will engage militarily with Iran. But I think it's probably an easier place for me to vote, so I actually don't do the work on Israel that I probably could have done. I vote off the sanctions argument. I think it's kind of cool. It kind of changed into this argument in second summary for me. Like, not that it changed the argument, but I felt like it fleshed out really nicely in second summary. I feel like some of that work probably could be done a little bit earlier. But I think the argument was read enough, early enough for me to vote off. So it kind of coincides with the offense, because I think you guys probably are winning that Iran is specifically aggressive in the region because of U.S. presence. I think that only answers the front half of the argument. The back half of the argument is that if U.S. leads, even if Iran can't be aggressive against the United States, they're probably going to take over Iraq. Right? That seems to be conceded. If that's insofar as that's true, then they paint this picture that Iraq becomes an enemy of the state, which means that probably gets sanctioned, which means that there's at least a direct loss of life in Iraq because they become a proxy ground of conflict for the United States and Iran through sanctions, which 220,000 people, were affected last time. It's probably an easiest place for me to vote because I feel like there's less contention on this idea of Iran being aggressive in Iraq absent the United States, even if Iran is mainly aggressive against the United States in the region. I think having a little bit more of that discussion in first summer or even in the first final focus would have been enough for me about why maybe even Iran doesn't care to expand in Iraq specifically, and not just they don't want to attack. Like, I get that U.S. can engage in a war, but what would Iran do absent the United States being there? It seemed like the Khan is telling me they would engage in this campaign of taking over Iraq, which would lead to their landing strip story. Does that make sense? All right, good job to both teams, and good luck to you guys the rest of the tournament.
Yes,
Thank you.
Can I ask you for feedback on the Israel argument?
Yeah.